welcome to Awards Heaven. I'm Rob Lucuria. I'm really excited today to be joined by Andrew Baker, filmmaker, who is currently shooting a film with a working title called The Potter. I've seen 20 minutes of it. I'm really impressed with it, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with Andrew today. Andrew, welcome.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
So, recently you screened 20 minutes of highlights from the film in Brooklyn. Um, what did that cut tell you about the film that you're actually still in the middle of making?
Well, I think you shoot with an idea and you have some sense of a film coming together in your head as you go, but when you really start assembling, first of all, scenes, then you kind of get a sense of how this moves. But when you start to see scenes together, then you really get a sense of the flow and the style and the energy and the rhythm of a film. And when I finally sat down and watched all that stuff together with my producer, John, it was like, oh, now I see there's a film in this. And you kind of think there is, but then when you see it, you really see it. The screening was really interesting because, people are seeing this out of order. There's no connection between scenes. We're just showing 20 minutes or so of just stuff, but interesting stuff together. So I think it left them wanting a lot, which is kind of the point right now, is to say, here are things we're working on, and it's just going to get better from here. So,
Yeah, I had the same reaction. I finished watching this highlight reel that you put together so beautifully, by the way. It could be a short film on its own, really, if you wanted to.
thanks.
And I wondered, okay, so I want to know more. So let's kind of dive into what this film is about. Renee Murray, and I've said her name correctly because it's spelt Renee, but it's actually not Renee. It's Renee.
Reading. Yep.
In her 80s, this really compelling, lovely potter slash artist, and she's still creating. What did you see in her that made you feel like this had to be documented in a film?
It's always hard to answer. I mean, I think when I start any project, there's something I feel like I can turn a camera on and start filming, and something will be there. And I think there's something about what Rini does, which is very physical and tangible. I felt like, all right, I can get a camera in there. But also, she is so interesting. She's just very unencumbered, let's say. She just is a free, when you ask her a question, she just answers. And sometimes the answer is much more vulnerable and open than you think it will be. Other times she says, I don't know, and you just keep going. But there's something very open about her, and I feel like it was those two things probably, that here's a person who will answer my questions but also show up, but also wants to be seen this way. And also, I can turn on a camera and start filming what she's doing, and it's already interesting. And where it would go and how things would play out, you never really know, and I didn't have a plan. There was just something fertile in that to begin with.
Actually, as an aside, as a filmmaker, when you decide you want to embark on a project and you want to film some scenes with a particular subject to see whether there's going to be a rapport, whether they're going to give you what you think you need.
Mhm.
Does it sometimes happen where you're just not really getting what you need and you decide to move on to something else? Or do you always find that you've made the right choice and then you go on a journey with this particular subject? Like in your experience, how does it normally pan out?
Well, I think by the time I start filming, usually I'd have a sense that there's something there that I can work with. But, recently, around the same time I started filming with Rini, I started filming with someone else in the neighborhood. And I had an idea that maybe this film is sort of a collage of different subjects. And this is a portrait of the Gowanus neighborhood in Brooklyn, more than just Rini, for example. And so I filmed with this guy for a few weeks, and he was really interesting. And he has this garage, several garages full of classic cars. And he just collects them, and I didn't really know what it was. And the more I filmed, the more it was clear that I really like the guy, and he's really interesting, but he didn't want to be open in the way that a documentary kind of needs to be open. I sensed that there were things about his life he didn't want to talk about on camera, which I completely respect. I totally understand. It's a very exposing thing to have a film made about you under the best circumstances. So, after a while, I just kind of pulled away from it and realized that, the film to make here was the one with Rini, and there's plenty there to work with. So yeah, sometimes you start filming and it just doesn't really seem to doesn't really seem to want to be filmed. Um,
Yeah,
and you just you
sometimes
move
it
on.
does.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning though with Rini. What was your first encounter with her, her work, or her space, and then what stayed with you in those early days when you realized, okay, she's actually really interesting and compelling?
Well, I met her a few years ago through her daughter Sarah, and I just got to know her as Rini first. I didn't. I'd heard that she was a potter, but I didn't see her work. I didn't really know too much about it. Um, and she was always interesting. There was always just something. She just speaks her mind. She's this old Brooklyn woman who just speaks her mind. Sorry, not old. She's this wonderful
Well,
Brooklyn woman who speaks her mind, who happens
yeah,
to be 84 at this point. And there was just something in there that just kind of over time. Once I got to see her work and got a sense of the things that I could look at with lenses and film, then everything just kind of seemed to make sense at that point. Um, did I finish the question? Did I finish the answer to
I
your
think
question?
so. When I watched the 20 minutes that I've seen, I remember telling you when I first met you that I found her just really inexplicably compelling. There's something
Mhm.
about her. It's like when
Yeah.
you look in her eyes, you just see, as you mentioned earlier, she's really open. She's a
Yeah.
really open person, and that makes her even more interesting because creative people can sometimes be quirky and closed off. She's not that at all. And I just then wonder, as you start to get to know her,
Mhm.
did you realize that this film's going to be about documenting the work itself that she is putting out in the world? Or is this really becoming, given her really interesting backstory, something closer to capturing her legacy as she's in the twilight, really, of her life?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's in some ways to be determined. I mean, I think all of
Yeah.
those will be a part of it. When I start almost all of my films, there's just a sense of I want to build a portrait of a person that I find interesting. I did a film with a shepherd. I've done two films with a shepherd up in Vermont. I did a film with a couple of one is a model train enthusiast up in Maine, and his wife is a painter, and I did a portrait of the two of them together. Um, and I'm more interested in the portraiture of the person than I am in what they do exactly.
Mhm.
But then, of course, as you start to build a story, what's interesting about them as a person is naturally a part of what they do. And so you start also seeing, all right, what is what they do? Tell me about who they are. And then you start getting more and more interested in what they do, and you start finding that stuff really fascinating. So I think, as I've seen, what's really important to Rini at this point, one of the things is that she wants to find a home for her work when she passes, and she doesn't want this to just kind of disappear. She's not a terribly well-known artist. So the idea of her legacy is important for her to get out there, and I feel like it's just a natural part of the portrait of the person, that all these things are out there. But the portraiture for me is the most important thing, because it's always about trying to understand the person, and how do you tell a story that kind of comes from the inside out of a person, and all those other things just kind of naturally fall into that.
Yeah, and of course, if the more that I started thinking about what she's putting out in the world, and her worldview appears to be rooted in the idea of a vessel
Mm,
and building work from the inside out, as you just said.
right.
So that obviously translates cinematically.
Mhm.
And so how do you mine that particular theme about the concept of a vessel and the vessel representing emotion or creativity or whatever it may be?
Well, the vessel for her is everything. When she talks about vessels, she calls everything a pot, for example. And I look at her one day. I looked at her. I was like, "Why are you calling this is a two-dimensional thing you put on the wall? Why is that a pot?" And she's like, "Everything's a pot. Everything's a vessel." Um, so the idea of, I mean, for me as a filmmaker, that's obviously very fertile. I can, it's a physical thing. If everything's a vessel, you can start thinking in three-dimensional terms. What you're filming is now something that can contain something. But also, she as a person is a vessel of sorts. So that idea for me is just it can go anywhere, and it's very fruitful in terms of understanding a person, but also being able to actually film something, which is sort of
Yeah.
for me the way in. I need to be able to find something that I can shoot, as opposed to talking heads, as opposed to just somebody expressing themselves in words all the time. So I love that her sense of her work is as something that is very tangible. Um, yeah.
Do you find that you have that in common with her as an artist, that you are creating a pot
Hmm.
as well, and
Sure.
you are, of course, highlighting and spotlighting who Rini is, but a lot of this film is going to be, I think, about you as well, about your perception of her, and your desire as an artist to have your work seen just like hers, just like all of us. So
Sure.
what do you feel about the universality thematically of what the potter might represent?
That's an interesting question. Um, well, I think that yes, every artist, we're all trying to sort of find a way for our ourselves in a way to be seen, which I think is most of the films that I've made have been about people who are either artists or people who want to express themselves in some way.
Mm. Yeah.
The last film I made before this was with my father, who was dying, and he wasn't an artist at all. He was a paramedic and a fireman and a corrections officer and a few other things. But in a way, he behaved like an artist for me in terms of really needing to express himself in a certain way, and needing that to be seen, to get that out there. Um, I feel like I've lost the thread of your question a little bit, but I think
No, I feel like you really hit the nail on the head, because I've been trying to grapple with when you're doing a film about an artist or
mm,
a paramedic, um, of course it's about the subject, but
mm,
it's through your lens, it's through
right,
your eyes. And so
right,
all art is subjective. And um, I always ask this to creative people. I always wonder, does it matter once, when all is said and done, does it matter if your film or whatever you've made just goes out into the ether
mm.
and is ignored? Would you prefer it to be like ignored, loved, hated? Does it matter? Like what is the end game for artists like yourself when you're making something and you're passionate about it and you want to share it with the world?
Yeah, yeah, that's tricky. I mean, for me, I find the end product so much less satisfying than making it.
Mm.
Um, I mean, as I'm shooting this piece, I'm also editing because it's taking a lot of time, and I can just sort of shoot a thing and then go and cut it, and boom, now I have a scene. And I'm very happy in this place. I mean, I'm actually very lost in the project right now. I don't quite know where I'm going with it, and that's a great place to be because you can kind of go anywhere with it. But once something is finished, now it's just fixed and locked and done. And if you do it well, great. I want as many people as possible to see it. I want people to not necessarily like it, but to get something out of it. I want them to be stirred in some way, either intellectually or emotionally, or ideally both. Um, but I also feel like I'm not really in control of that. That you do what you can to get these films out there. You want them to have an audience, but once it's done and out there, it's not yours anymore. In a way, it's sort of yeah, it's an expression of you always, but now it's sort of a thing that you put out and now you move on. It's an interesting phase. I was having a conversation with a buddy today, another filmmaker, about this very thing, about being done with a piece and moving on from it. It's a strange place for me to live in. I'm never very comfortable in it, but you always are trying to get it finished and out. And then you're left with doing another one. And that's where you're happy again. I
Yeah.
think I think
You
Rini's
know,
in kind of the same place actually. I think
yes, that's
she's
exactly what
much
I was going to
happier
say.
being yeah, and she wants the recognition and she deserves it. Her work is great, but I think
Mm.
she's so much happier just being in the studio and just jamming away on something.
Yeah. And maybe ultimately that's the goal, that's the sweet spot for artists. Like I was talking to a visual effects artist the other day, just as an aside, and he said, You never really finish with a shot. You could just
Right.
work on it forever, but
Sure.
you eventually have to let go and let
Yep.
it out there in the world. And I feel like that's really where you'll head there at some point
Yeah.
soon with the
Yeah.
product.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I
fascinating.
mean, you go until there's. I feel like you go until there's nothing that you can make better anymore, and then it's
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, that's it. And you've got to move forward. And so far, given that you're pretty entrenched in the process, and editing and shooting, what's really surprised you most about Rini as a subject? Something that you weren't really expecting.
Um, hmm. That most surprises me about her. Um, I think what's really interesting about Rini is, I mean, for me, I think what's really interesting is how sharp she is and how deliberate and attentive she is to her own work and her own process. I mean, I think it's one thing to see an artist's finished work. It's another thing to spend time with them while they're making it, and to see that at 84 she is at least as focused on what she does as anyone I've ever worked with or watched work, if not more so. She's just got a drive, and she works quickly, and she's so intense about it. And I get to I get to see a side of her that most people don't, because in your day to day life you don't really behave the way you do when you're really creating, And there's such a focus that she kind of settles into, that I love that she still has at 84, especially. That's just really, I want that. you know.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. Really,
Yeah.
really is. I
Yeah.
feel like she's in her prime. She's still in
Oh,
her
I
prime.
know. I know. And she's talked about her prime as being much, long time ago. But like,
Yeah,
I don't know. I think she's in it.
she's still in it.
Yeah.
She's really, really fascinating. So you did the 20-minute cut. You screened it in Brooklyn, as a way to, get it out there and bit of fundraising, perhaps. Um, what was the reaction like in the room? And was there any reaction that maybe you weren't really expecting?
Well, the reaction is pretty positive for the most part. When I show my own work, I like to sit in the back and just watch people. I don't need to watch the film at all. So I just sort of observe and listen a bit, and people seemed really into it. You never know, because a lot of it's, they're kind of a captive audience. They know I'm there, so those kinds of screenings are always a little bit unsure of what you really
Hmm.
made. Um, but overall, the impression was we want more. People just really seem to want more of this. Like, they were like, "Why did you only show 20 minutes?" It's like, well, I can't show you too much now, and it's not
It's not
cut. It's
ready.
not really assembled. Yeah, it's not really there. But I probably could have shown 45 minutes of stuff.
Wow.
I've got a lot of stuff put together, and again, it's all bits and snippets and little scenelets that don't quite work yet. Um, but yeah, there seemed to be a sense that this is something really interesting. There's also, I think, a sense in this particular documentary climate, because I did invite some other filmmakers along, of how does this get seen? In what world does this get out and recognized?
Yeah.
Because the documentary world has changed a lot in the last decade or so, and it isn't what it once was, and the market's much smaller, and what people seem to want to put their money into is not this kind of piece overwhelmingly. So I think there's a sense of, this is great. How are you going to do it?
Yeah. And do you have those answers yet?
No, no,
Not
yeah.
even close. I mean, yeah. Is that because there's no point you even contemplating that yet until it's become its thing. It's not ready. Is that the reason?
That's kind of it. I mean, I think if I've made some commercial work over the years, and there's always some constraints, some good, some not so good. But when you know where you're going with it, that's one thing. But this is a whole other kind of freedom that's really important to me, to just be able to say that this is the film I'm going to make, and it's going to go where I can get it, and I'm going to get the audience for it I can. But while I'm making it, it's very much a thing that I can't worry about that. I'm also thinking that at this point, this film might take another year to finish, maybe. I don't know what the landscape's going to look like in the doc world a year from now. A lot of what's going on here in the States is changing a lot. Funding is going away for organizations. PBS, which is might be a really good outlet for something like this, is in some
Mm.
serious trouble. So I think it's a little premature to say, I'm going to try to get this here. I'm going to try to get this there. I'm going to try to shape this in hopes that it will land there when it's over. But also, I guess if you're approaching this as something that is its own kind of art form, you really just can't think about that stuff too much. And I'm lucky that I'm making it more or less on my own, more or less on my own time, that I don't have to think about those things. It's kind of a luxury, but it's also, it makes the piece that much smaller, and that much harder to get out. So those are the things you got to juggle, I guess.
Absolutely. And so now that you've shown a glimpse of the film, there's obviously a long road ahead,
Right.
um, and a lot of it is unknown. Some of it you can control. So, what, in your mind, given your experience, what does finishing this film actually look like for you from here?
Well, I mean, I mentioned that I'm a little bit lost in the story right now. And part of that is because it's not something I get to make up. And I just got to sit with Rini and her time and sort of find things as it goes. So I'm kind of digging around in a few little avenues that I just want to dip in and do and see if they turn into stories, see if they become things that I can work with. Um, and at the moment, this is a good place to be, because it also lets me edit the many, many, many hours I've got already. I mean, I must have 80 or 100 hours of footage at this point.
Wow.
A lot of that's just B-roll. A lot of that's just like shooting the same shot over and over again until I get it right.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of it's also, just hanging out with her, and you get these little scenes that you don't even know are scenes until you start cutting them sometimes. So I'm in a relatively good spot, but we're still trying to get funding. We're still trying to find a way to keep this thing moving.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at with it right now, and it's there are worse places to be.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And you know what? From my perspective, I'm really looking forward to going on this journey with you over the next few months, however long it's going to take. And for all of my listeners, watchers, readers, subscribers, we'll definitely touch base at some point soon and look back on this interview and see what's changed,
Mhm.
what things you weren't expecting, where you're up to. I'm really looking forward to this. I really am. I can't wait to see where this is headed. And I think a lot of people are really interested in what independent filmmakers go through to put
Mhm.
their art out into the world that we all enjoy. But it's
Mhm.
such a labor of love, isn't it? It's not easy. And I'm sure you've gone through days where you think this is really, really tough. And then you've gone through days where you think this is just the best thing I've ever done. And so I was just wondering how are you feeling about sharing this journey with people who are interested in this particular side of independent filmmaking?
Well, I think I hope it's illuminating. I hope it helps to see that there are a lot of different ways to make a film. And to do it this way does require that it stays kind of small, in a way. And the intimacy is really important. But also that, I mean, I worked on documentaries as a sound guy for a long time and as a cinematographer for a while. I still do that. And, most of the time you just have these tight schedules and you got to go off to Cincinnati and shoot for 5 days, and you got everything you're going to get there in that period of time. And this project isn't constrained like that. And so I think, for people who want to make films like this or want to make films on essentially their own terms, that this is a good thing to be able to see in some way. Um, Beyond that, I'm just trying to make a good film, and anybody who can see this and get something out of it, that's great. That's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you being so open, and I appreciate your candor, Andrew. Like, I think this is a really interesting, compelling journey that you're going on, that you've been on before, but for many of us, we have no insight into how films are made and how the sausage is made behind the scenes. And so, thank you so much for being available for this, and good luck for the next few months. And let's catch up in a few months' time and see where you're at.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I appreciate it. And yes, let's definitely catch up.